Welcome to the Line Life podcast. I'm Jeff Postlethwaite of T&D World, and today we're bringing you more stories of the grit, courage, and inspirational teamwork that it takes to be a line worker.
Thank you for tuning in to the T&D World Line Life podcast, produced by Endeavor Business Media, a division of Endeavor B2B. My name is Amy Fishbach, and I'm the field editor for T&D World and also the host of the Line Life podcast. Before I dive into today's episode, I invite you to become part of our Line Life podcast community by searching for the Line Life podcast in your favorite podcasting app or going to linelife.podbean.com and clicking follow in the top right. We air interview-style episodes on the first and third Fridays of each month, and also audio stories in our In Case You Missed It series featuring articles that appeared in our print magazine on the second and fourth Fridays of each month. If you have a comment on this episode or a suggestion for a future guest, please reach out to me. You can email me at amyfishbach@gmail.com or reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Instagram at Lineman World. I'd love to hear from you. Now let's move on to today's episode. For part 2 of our 2-part series on Hurricane Helene 1 year later, we're going to look at the Chimney Rock and Bat Cave area where there was extensive restoration following Hurricane Helene. For example, there was a raging river that went down Main Street and a lot of homes disappeared, along with 5 bridges and miles of a street, and 1 resident died. Over the last year, the community has come a long way, but it's still under recovery and the crews are still doing work in this area. For this episode, we are again featuring journeyman line workers from Duke Energy, including Miles Bell, Jordan Henderson, and Heath Burrell. Now let's listen in on the second part of the conversation that I had with them about the Hurricane Helene restoration a year ago. Miles, Jordan, and Heath, thank you so much for joining us again for the second part of this series on Hurricane Helene. For part 2, I'd like to focus on Chimney Rock and also the nearby community of Bat Cave. Can you 3 talk about the restoration that you did in this area and also the damage that you discovered when you got on site?
So at first, it literally looked like a war zone when we first made it there. Chimney Rock's an iconic place. People from all over the country know about Chimney Rock. It's a big tourist location, a lot of history. It's a historic site. And it's just been a kind of staple in my life for my whole life, living close there. And when we were first able to make it there, it was like just a scene out of a movie. It looked like somebody dropped a bomb. There were, I would say, 50% of the buildings were gone. The road was gone. The river was 3 or 4 times as wide as it used to be. It was chaos. And then Bat Cave, which is right up the road, maybe a mile or 2 up the road from Chimney Rock, it was the same. They're on the same river. So that was a total rebuild. And just driving or just transportation there was nearly impossible. The poor people that lived there, they were stranded for multiple days with no way out except for by helicopter because every road going in or out was gone. And speaking of that, going to Bat Cave, when we finished up what we could do in Chimney Rock, which was basically we got the fire department on. That was really all we could do there because the structures were so damaged. We really couldn't put power on anything at the time. So we got the fire department on, and we got as many street lights on as we could just to bring some light back to the place. And then we tried to move into Bat Cave, but there was no road to get there. So me and a coworker, we actually got on our side-by-side, a Polaris one day, and we rode for about 8 hours trying just to access the area. Finally, we got there. We had to get permission to go across private property, use some private roads, and the roads were sketchy at best, but we did get there and discover that, hey, we found a path. And then in the next couple of days, we started getting big trucks in and trying to work. But the devastation was just unreal. Our right-of-ways were gone. The community really came together in both of those areas because we were walking at sometimes from house to house asking people, hey, can we put a power line through your backyard that didn't used to be there, but it was just the only real estate left that we could get wire in the air. And everybody was, accepting of that and told us, hey, do what you need to do. We want everybody to get their lights back on. Kind of everybody's mantra was, until we have power, nothing else matters. So everybody really worked with us to make that happen. And then it was all, I won't say all, but mostly track machine work, setting poles with helicopter, very inaccessible.
It still looks like there's work going on there. Can you describe what kind of work is going on right now in that area?
So the work we're doing as a power company now is, as some of these structures are getting built back or getting repaired enough to where they can have power, we're going in now and rebuilding lines to that, or just turning meters on to try to get the power back on these structures. As far as our work, that's really all we have right now, is just answering to individual structures of, hey, we're ready, and then we go figure out how to build a line to it. But as far as the community, there's still a lot of work to be done there. There's several relief groups there that are volunteering, building basically all the town back. And they've really come a long way, but they still have a lot of construction left to do.
We're still fed from us, correct?
Yeah. And actually, as like Heath just said, we're actually still feeding all the customers there with an alternate source. We still don't even have the line built back to where it used to be. We had to back feed from 2 different areas, actually, and split the customers up just to get the power back on. And it'll probably be like that for at least 2 or 3 more years, because that's how long it's going to take for the road construction to be finished.
And now let's talk about some of the other areas that you worked in following Hurricane Helene.
So we was on a line, 2 different lines. It's a deep gap line and big hungry line. And we ended up setting, I want to say, 11 poles with a helicopter, all inaccessible. What had happened is a dam collapsed, Big Hungry Dam had collapsed and washed the bridge out. And it probably has 90 to 100 customers back on the other side of this bridge, and there's zero access to any of it. So we ended up going ahead of everybody, hand digging the holes. Had a helicopter come in for 2 days, I think, and setting all these poles with helicopter, working them off hooks, and ended up getting a track bucket in there to them. But as far as what we seen on my side where I was at, I didn't get to work on the Chimney Rock side, but that Big Hungry line, the deep gap line, that was some rough stuff.
Just to piggyback off of what Miles was saying, so the Lake Hawk substation, that's what's feeding Chimney Rock right now, and that circuit was mine going down 64 East. And just to put into perspective, I think we set 48 poles, and we built 2 miles of 3-phase 556 in about 3 days. That was a huge project. We had 3 crews in there 4 or 5 days before trying to give us access to our pole line and what was left. We were also working around DOT because the bridge that separated us from Chimney Rock and Bat Cave, I think it's gone. They've got it rebuilt now. But it was more, I got to get the 3-phase down there to them, and Miles is building his side back up. I'm going to say they was working down there, but they weren't getting any lights on until we got it there. But we had crews. Ultimately, once the trees were out of the way, we had several people coming in here trying to get customer permission. We were staking trying to get where we could put poles as best we could, because there's about a half a mile that the road's gone.
Yeah.
Like half the road. It's a 2-lane road that goes down, and the whole thing collapsed, and it's probably 70 feet to the bottom, to the river. Yeah. So it's a 1-lane road. You got dump trucks going down through there. You've got tourists looking. Like, it was just a huge project. But we had crews setting poles and framing out front. If we run into rock, we had rock crews in there beating on rock for a few days until we got our pole line. And then we had our local crews, a guy named Joe Daniels. If you ever meet him, you'll never forget him. But when he got on site, wire out in the air. And again, they pulled, like I said, 2 miles in 3 days, 48 poles.
It's funny because all 3 of us are on the rodeo team together. And normally we're all competing with one another against other people. And on this storm, we were kind of competing against each other. Because like Heath said, I was working on one side of the river, and he was on the other side. The bridge was gone. We could see each other, but we couldn't get to each other. So we could see each other, but it took about an hour to drive around to actually get to each other. And they were bringing the power line down one side, and we were rebuilding it on the other, trying to meet in the middle so we could get all these lights back on. So we were racing each other for the first time ever, because normally we're racing with each other.
Oh, that's incredible. I mean, it takes a lot of teamwork in the line trade, right?
Oh, absolutely. Without it, it wouldn't get done.
Oh, that's great. And then what are some best practices or tools or technologies that really helped you guys during the storm response to expedite the restoration?
So technology was kind of non-existent for the first couple weeks because we didn't have any. So really the best practices that we had were old school. Everything was pen and paper. We had no phones. Our radios didn't work because they were digital. I had to go home, and I literally had to get my kids walkie-talkies just so we could talk. And we were using paper maps. Everything's now is on the computer. We had to go back to paper. But best practices were just take you back to the fundamentals, just how we all learned how to do line work without a lot of fancy stuff. We just had to take it back there and just do all the little things and stay safe. That was the main thing is we can't help other people if we're hurt. So do what we need to do to stay safe, flag and tag our lines, ground, wear your PPE. That was really what it boiled down to.
I'd say Miles really hit it right there with the grounding and the PPE. I couldn't emphasize enough, with the crew that I was with the whole time we was out working. I mean, even, in the back of our minds, we know, we don't even have substations on. And in the back of your mind, you're like, well, there can't be power on it. But you still got to think, well, people's got generators running. You got so many people with generators and everything else, and who knows how they had them hooked up or anything else. So, we stuck to the basics of, testing and grounding. Testing and grounding, testing and grounding. If we moved, we was testing and grounding. I don't know how many different lines was tested and grounded the whole time we was working. If I could have had a $5 bill every time we tested and grounded the line, I could probably go ahead and retire this year. But that's back to the basics, That's our protective, Even though they're saying everything's dead and there's no way, you never know. So, but as far as tools and technology, like he said, the technology was kind of thrown out the window there for a while until we started getting some power back on. But man, the best tool that I had the whole time was that helicopter. Mm-hmm. I can't emphasize on how much time that thing saved us, as far as getting poles in and getting them in the ground. And next to that was getting a track bucket in some places that, it would have took us a full day to do off hooks, to where if we got a track bucket in there, it's taking us, 2 hours. Them track machines and that helicopter played a big role in this storm because there was a lot of inaccessible stuff.
I will say one technology that we were actually able to use that was very beneficial is our local fire department had a big drone. And I teamed up with them for several days, and they flew some lines for me that were inaccessible. We couldn't get vehicles there. And that really helped us out a lot just by being able to see what we had down and what we needed to plan for. But other than that, like Jordan said, the helicopter and that track equipment really saved the day.
I'm just advocate for the side-by-sides. We didn't have no roads. I think we've got 2 in our op center. There's no telling how many miles we put on them, but those saved a lot of walking. So that's what I would go with.
And I'd love to hear more about the helicopters. Did you use them mainly to set the poles, or did you use them to transport the line workers into the areas as well?
Yeah, so the only thing we utilized them for was actually just setting poles. We didn't do any work off the helicopter. Not in my area, but we did set a lot of poles. I think, and don't quote me on this, but I think we set 190 poles with a helicopter in our area. And if it hadn't have been for that, some of this restoration would have been possibly weeks longer. because a lot of these places it's hard to hike to, much less carry a pole to.
And were you replacing the broken poles with wood poles, or what did you replace them with?
Yeah, everything we did was we went back with wood.
And you talked about a lot of the challenges you faced during the restoration, but are there any others that you want to talk about and how you overcame them? Like maybe the flood water. Did you guys have any issues with that at all, or did that kind of subside by the time you guys started working?
So for probably the first 2 days, we dealt with flood water still, in some standing areas that cut access down, But honestly, the water wasn't nowhere near as bad as having to deal with the trees down. Between my house and the op center is only normally a 5-minute drive. And like I said earlier, it turned that into a 15, 20-minute drive trying to figure out a way to get here. But the water really receded, about as quick as it come up, honestly.
Yeah, talking about like the flooding in the trees. So my brother, he's a lineman on transmission for Duke. His op center is probably 45 minutes away, and it took him 13 hours to get to work on the first day because he would run into a flooded, bridge out or something flooded, have to turn around, and then it was basically just cutting trees. But it took him 13 hours to find ways around and just cutting trees out of the road.
Yeah, I think it's bridges gone and the road's gone. We had local crews. If there was machinery on site, I could take you to a couple where we'd get permission and our foremen would jump on their machines and build their own ways to the pole or get across the creek or whatever it took. Everybody just kind of jumped in and made it happen. But definitely road access and bridges. That was a big one for me.
Did you work alongside tree crews, or did you have to cut down some trees and clear them as well?
I mean, we had tree crews, but honestly, for the first week, everybody was a tree crew.
Yeah.
We didn't have any choice. If it was something very technical or, we just didn't have the equipment for it, we would give those big jobs to the tree professionals. But as far as clearing roads and, routine stuff, everybody had chainsaw, chaps, their PPE on cutting trees. And we had a lot of help from the community, too. I've got several friends that do grading work and stuff, and they were following us around, helping us clear roads and just doing what they could to help us get through so we could get the lights back on.
Yeah, like Miles was saying, first probably week and a half, we was the tree crews, We had to make access to get something started. You had to start somewhere, and the only place you could start was getting the trees off the lines and getting the lines, laid out to where they could be put back up. And like he was saying, I don't know how many guys I seen, old farmers, guys that do grading and stuff out with their tractors and just clearing the roads as much as they could and cutting what they could, without it being too dangerous. But, if we would have just waited on tree crews and wouldn't have had the community come together like we did, it would have doubled the time, with everybody coming in together and jumping in like they did. That's what got the lights back on the quickest.
And during our conversation, you guys were talking a lot about doing the basics of line work without any technology or any communication. How do you think the apprentices were able to deal with that? And do you think it taught them a lot about what line workers used to have to do before they had a lot of the equipment?
I think it was a great learning experience for them, because there's still a bunch of guys coming up that's probably might not ever get to experience anything like that. Without having access to their phones and starting at a substation, working your way out without any direction at all, just cut dry back to the basics line work, of building power lines back. It was a very good learning experience. And like I was saying earlier, it was a good learning experience to teach them just because we know that the substation is completely underwater and we know there's no power coming to it from our sides. It was a good learning moment about generators, and you still have to go back to the basics of testing and grounding,
Absolutely. And do you have any lessons learned from this hurricane that you might use for other storm response situations? Hopefully you won't have to deal with something of this magnitude again.
Yeah, I hope we don't ever have to face another one like Helene. But I think for me, if I ever have a similar role on a storm like this, The thing I've probably learned is you can't do it all yourself. You got to kind of give some stuff up and delegate a little bit and let other people help you. Because I know for me, I had 200 some people, and at first I was trying to do everything, keep them moving, scout lines, make sure they had food, and it's just about dang near impossible. So being able to pick people to help you and let them help you is really the main thing I learned.
Yeah, I'll kind of piggyback off what Miles said, delegation. I had a guy from down east that had come in to help me, and the meals and logistics, he handled that, and it's unreal the amount of stress that took from my daily, what I felt like I had to do. But yeah, I would stick with the delegate. And then kind of off what you was talking about a minute ago, I've been in this for 20 years. I know we was talking about apprentices, but the mapping, I don't know that I've ever worked a storm where I worked off a map. And I had a big crew. They were from Canada, and that's how they worked. Like, they come in requesting maps. So, we spent hours printing maps, but through this, that's the way to go. We get too reliant on these computers, and I've used our mapping system for years, but the map don't lie, and it's easy to follow your roads. So, that's one thing I've learned, that I would probably request a map from here on out anywhere I'm working.
I'd say the biggest thing that I took from it, well, I'd say two things. It hit a lot different having that big of a storm at home where you live. I've been on major storms, hurricanes in Florida a lot and stuff, and I've seen it. But having it at your own home really put it in a different perspective, So I'll always have that probably in the back of my mind. Traveling on other storms now probably, opened your eyes up a little bit more what other people are going through at their own homes and communities now that I've seen it happen here and had to deal with it while working too. And, the other thing is, most storms that I've been on and have traveled on are at the most 2-week storms. And that's kind of how I hit this one to begin with. And I about burnt myself out the first 2 weeks after working 16-hour days for 2 weeks straight, Ended up working, 2 more weeks, 16 hours straight. And I'd really pace myself or learn to pace myself if I've ever had to work a storm of this magnitude again.
And is there anyone you want to give a shout out to on this episode of the Line Life podcast?
I'll give a shout out to all the people that came in to help us from out of town. Joe Daniels' crew, especially, they were really rock stars. I mean, everybody was. And then I'd just like to give a shout out to my wife and kids, because without them helping out, I couldn't have been at work helping people every day. They were really the backbone for me. So,
like he said, it's definitely my wife and kids. The only time they got to see us whenever they was helping, bring waters or lunch. They didn't. I was gone in the morning when they woke up, and they was asleep whenever I got home. Having to deal with that, being a mother, and having to deal with the kids not being in school and everything else, I'm sure was a lot. And I'd like to give a shout out to all the Canadian crews that come down and helped out. Those were some really, really good guys. And all the crews that we got here out of our op center in Harrisville, they all done a gem-up job.
Yeah, the crews I had Holland, Gagnon, D&D, Riggs and Disler, our local Sumter. They all showed up and showed out. And then, again, my wife, she gave a lot. She would come in and helping in the op center if needed. I know she got involved in the laundry, got involved in putting bags together, trying to just, be assistance to me and those around us. So I'm thankful for her.
That's awesome, you guys. Well, I really appreciate you taking out the time to talk to me for the Line Life podcast and for all you did to get the lights back on and the power flowing to your communities.
Thanks for having us, Amy.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Line Life podcast produced by Endeavor Business Media, a division of Endeavor B2B. Be sure to subscribe or follow the Line Life podcast in your favorite podcasting app so new episodes will be delivered straight to you. For more insights, you can visit our website at tdworld.com/podcasts or linelife.podbean.com. You can also connect with us by following us on Instagram at Lineman World or on Facebook, LinkedIn, or X. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Line Life Podcast.